Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Film Seizure. My name is Jeff Arbuckle. With me, as always, is Chuck Moore.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Chuck. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Oh, not too bad. And, of course, Jason Oliver. Jason, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going?
Hey. We're the Film Seizure, and we're here to seizure around.
We're here to treasure some madres.
Yeah, that's right. Treasure your madre. Anyway,
everyone should treasure their
Stop
mother.
talking about my mother.
So this week we have a true classic, a movie that many directors that basically came up through the 60s, the 70s, and onward, even up to today. They say if you want to become a good director, you must see The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. This is directed by John Huston, produced by Henry Blank, starring the incomparable Humphrey Bogart.
Humphrey.
Yes, indeed. Kind of against type for Bogey a little bit.
A little bit. He's a villain here, but he doesn't start that way, and I think that's one.
No, he does not. But the true soul, the true nature of his soul is brought out by his greed for gold.
Yep. His good nature wilts in the everlasting shine of that lovely gold.
Well, that's just poetry, Jeff.
I know, right? Hey, I've dabbled. All right. So, why did I pick this movie? By the way, this is the oldest movie we've ever covered on Film Seizure. Not the oldest movie I've ever talked about. Of course, Monster Mondays. I think Dracula is the oldest movie I've ever covered on there, going back to the early 30s. But this is not typically one of the movies that we tend to talk about. I think sometimes we like to talk about movies that we grow up with or something that was transformative or whatever the case may be. This one is a little bit of a lot of things, right? First of all, we like to talk about really good movies sometimes. We've talked about our Chinatowns, our One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, our other movies. We've talked.
I thought you were going to pick another Jack Nicholson movie.
Well, I could. The Shining. We've talked about The Shining.
It does seem like the best movies we've talked about just so happen to have Jack Nicholson in them. I wonder why that is.
And
Jeff.
Just so happen to typically be picked by me.
Yeah.
Well, he was also in a stinker too.
Jeff, he was.
But no. This was. I wanted to pick this because this is something that gets brought up every now and then. Every now and then I'll come across something on Facebook feed or Twitter or on a YouTube video where somebody is talking about like, well, what are some of your favorite movies or what is your favorite movie? And almost without fail, somebody will either bring up The Treasure of the Sierra Madre or The Maltese Falcon. And I think that The Maltese Falcon is something we can definitely talk about later too. But The Treasure of the Sierra Madre is one that is always the sneaky pick, I think, where somebody brings that up and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of things to talk about this movie in a relatively straightforward plot. And I think that it made a lot of sense when I was kind of compiled a list and it's like, hey guys, I was just kind of going through HBO Max and just seeing what could be out there, what tickled the interest, if you will. And this was one. I was like, hey, this might be a good one. And I think Jason, you're the one who are like, yes, do that one. So let's talk about it. I'll hand the ball off to whoever wants to take it here.
I think it's first important to recognize this movie's kind of place in Hollywood history is it's a Hays Code era film. So it is subject to all of the scrutinizing censorship of that time in Hollywood, which I think John Huston cleverly gets around. in several places. But it is still sort of like it's that one limitation on this film where you could tell he was trying. It wasn't quite what he wanted it to be, but he made it the best he could, right, within the confines of those censorship rules. It's also, interestingly, the first Hollywood production to shoot on location outside of the United States.
Oh,
Very first time that ever happened. Yep. Shot in Mexico, Durango, state of Durango, in the city of Tampico and around there. All the city scenes were Tampico, and then, of course, they did a lot of like rural shooting in the countryside, the mountains of Durango. So I just think that's interesting. Kind of an amazing thought to that. There had to be a first, right? And this was it.
That's actually really pretty surprising, honestly. But I would have thought something before the World War would have been shot in, someplace other than a backlot, or because to be honest with you, to me, I thought, oh, this is probably just shot in like Death Valley or something, or the outside shots. I do have something that I do want to say, and I'll just go ahead and say it because there's no really good place to drop this. I think this movie, and this is something, and I was talking to my dad last night about this. He had called and asked me about something, and I called him back after I watched this movie, and he asked me about what I thought about that, and it's like, well, two things really stand out beyond the acting, beyond the story, beyond all of that, and one I'll get to later. But one of the things that really stood out for me is something that if you watch enough black and white movies, and I've seen quite a few black and white, like monster movies and stuff that was probably made a little bit on the cheap, but it was also something that is very common across a lot of black and white movies. It is usually relatively stark how different it is when you film something on location and then you move into a set. And in this movie, they match the lighting, the scenery perfectly, where you still know they're on a set, but it is so perfectly matched with the backdrop matching the color of the sky, or the color in a black and white movie, but you know what I mean, like the tone and the hue of everything matched so perfectly that there were sometimes I was sitting there thinking, oh, maybe this wasn't a set, maybe they are shooting outside in like a campfire scene, or when they stopped working on like the mountain or whatever. It is something that black and white movies really, really don't do very well. And that is the transition from outside to inside. But this movie did it perfectly. And again, I'll just go ahead and say it. It's the little things. It's always the little things that make a movie greater than what you think it is on the surface.
You and your little things.
I know, right? I know.
Another thing I think is significant about this movie, and it's not necessarily a positive or negative, it's just a thing of interest. Most movies of this era, almost out of necessity, because they believed it was part of the formula for a successful film, was to have a leading female in a very prominent speaking role, and this movie does not have that. So it kind of goes against a little bit of the convention of the time in making an adventure movie.
Yeah, almost always there would be some sort of a love interest kind of shoehorned into any type of
absolutely. It was basically like a studio requirement almost of this era. Yeah,
there's definitely a love interest in this movie. Is gold.
Yep. That is true.
Gold,
yes.
Gold is the
Lady Luck,
stand-in.
gold, the shimmering gold. Yeah.
It's the stand-in for the woman all the boys would fight over.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
very good point.
That's a good point. And I believe though it's very, very likely that John Huston could probably make whatever movie he wanted. There was no concern that he didn't have. He didn't present a script without any significant female character. I mean, I think the only
it's also a very popular. It was based on a very popular book, if
Sure.
I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure the novel was well liked, and you're gonna adapt the novel, you're gonna adapt the novel, right?
Right. I think the only females you see in this movie are in the Indian tribe, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Well, there's a couple
potentially
in
in the villages.
There's
in
a
the
couple in
villagers.
Tampico with the Pat McCormick is with the girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And he's stiffing her too, so she's pissed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah. So there you go. There's your love story, Hollywood. Take it. There you go. Yeah. So who wants to? You guys, as you pointed out before we started recording, you actually have a little bit more. You have more notes than I have. So whoever wants to dive in from here, let's do it.
Well, you immediately meet Humphrey Bogart, Dobbs, Fred C. Dobbs, and he is kind of down on his luck. Seems to be a bit of a grifter, bit of a just man of low character at first sight, because he's, I mean, not necessarily low character, but he's a little, I don't know.
He's a drifter. He's a
drifter.
He's a.
So you're immediately kind of like, ooh, who's this guy, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's Humphrey Bogart, and he's asking other American expats in Tampico for he's begging for money. In fact, he begs for money 3 times from John Huston himself.
Right.
In this movie.
The man in
I just realized that was John Huston like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is when I first saw his face in the movie, I was trying to do the math, because at first I thought it might have been because it's been so long since I've seen this, I thought it might have been his father, because I was like, damn, that looks just like John Huston. That must be Walter. And then I was like, no, that's not right. That's fucking John Huston. That's why he looks just like John Huston.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's begging for money. What is it? Stake a fellow American a meal is what he asks. Keeps asking him.
Yeah, and he's asking, it seems like, constantly for money that isn't for meals. So it's that age old hobo thing. Like, I'm just going to keep asking, even though I've had my meal. Now I need a haircut.
And now I need a drink, or
yeah.
And I think the reason why the John Huston character is somebody he keeps going back to is that a lot of people will just kind of toss him centavos, but he gets a whole peso from John Huston, and so it's like, well, there's a lot that he can do with that. That would be 2 nights at the shitty little shack that they stay at.
Well, yeah, he can even buy 1/20th of a lottery ticket.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's an interesting line, or a great line, and it's kind of funny when you think of the backdrop of Huston being the director of this film. The last time he asks him for money, he gives him 2 pesos, and he says, "From now on, you have to make it through life without my assistance."
Yeah.
It's just so great. He's like, yeah, this is the last time, dude.
Yeah, it's like you asked me at breakfast. You asked me when I had my shoes shine. Now you're asking me again. He gives him a peso, and it's like, and I don't want you to ask me again. And by the way, just in case you forget that, here's a second peso.
Yeah, and in that time, he runs into Curtin. Is like somewhere in between him asking John Huston for money. He runs into Curtin, who's sleeping on a bench or sitting on a bench, and they talk a little bit about, how hard life is. This is a bad town to be poor in. Curtin's like, what town isn't? So they kind of have form some kind of kinship there. Prior to the next point, I don't want to skip ahead too far. But
well, there's a funny scene when I think it's when he's spending one of his pesos.
It's before
he
meets up with Curtin. He has his meal. He has a drink,
and it's important for a couple of reasons. But it really is the first time you really see his character. I think that he is, not necessarily a good guy, selfish, because he's not willing to give this poor beggar boy any money. He doesn't want to buy a lottery ticket from.
By the way, do you guys
calls him a beggar?
Says,
get away from me!
Threatens
get
to
away
throw
from
his
me, little
water.
beggar, or I'll throw water in your face. And he does throw water.
And he does throw water in his face. By the way, do you know who the little boy is?
No.
It's Robert Blake.
No way! Oh my God!
It is.
That's so weird.
Yeah,
crazy.
That is really crazy. Huh. Interesting. Well, wow. Huh. So he ends up buying. He does end up buying the lottery ticket. He gets the number 13, right? Which he gets a chuckle out of. But he puts it in his pocket and he forgets about it.
Yes, and then that's when
Yep.
he goes out to the bench, and Bob is there, and I think they kind of know each other. Like maybe they've worked jobs before, but they've kind of. It seems as though they are already a little bit friendly, but they kind of go their separate ways, and they cross paths every now and then because they're like you said, Chuck. There is. We get to see a kinship form between two characters, but it feels like it was already kind of there, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when he sees John Huston getting the shoe shined again, and he gets that pay, so he decides to go get a haircut. Now this was one of those little things that happens, and it brought a pretty good little chuckle to me. He gets his haircut and he goes outside, and he's looking cleaner now, right? He's going to put his hat back on, and his hat's too big now.
Yep. It's funny. He puts it on a few times. Like, oh,
it's broken. Yeah. He ends up throwing the hat away or something, doesn't he? Or he doesn't have it for a little while.
Yeah, I think he puts it back on in that scene, but then the next time you see him, he's hatless.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
And then that's when it transitions into the evening when he runs into, this time with the haircut, he does run into John Huston again. That's when John Huston's like, this is the third time now. Stop, start asking other Americans, stop bleeding me dry, basically. And he's like, here we go. Here's this. And if you, just in case you forget, here's a second one to kind of go on your way. And so that night, he ends up just kind of panhandling outside of a saloon. And that's when we meet Pat McCormick, who he is seemingly an up and up citizen. He's like, hey, I don't have any money. I've got nothing to give you, but I will give you a job. It's like, can you work this job? And basically, is it a yeah, it's basically to construct the oil rigs, and he's like, it's going to be for $8 a day, which, god damn, that would have been an unbelievable amount of money in the 20s.
Right.
So yeah, he jumps right for it. And then it shows him and Bob Curtin working on the rigs. It's a few days work. They come back across the ferry, and then things start to get a little shifty.
Yeah, I mean, McCormick had been telling them they'll get their money as soon as they get back, as soon as we get off the ferry. Because
they
I'll
are
give you a bonus.
They are kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so it does make sense. Bogey asks for his money, but McCormick's like, well, where are you going to spend it anyway out here? Kind of makes sense. You can kind of forgive that.
Yeah, and he tells everyone basically that somebody is supposed to meet them at the pier to give him the money, but unfortunately they don't show up, right? So
it's lucky this guy doesn't get killed, seriously.
I thought he was going to get killed.
Yeah.
Turns out he's a little tougher than he appears too.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah,
so
I'll talk about that in a minute. It reminded me of something.
He ends up giving Curtin and Dobbs $10 and says, meet me at this bar, boys, like kind of on the down low. I'll get you guys paid, and they go to the bar.
It's 1:45. I'll be there no later than 3.
Right. And they sit there and get drunk.
And it's 5 till 7 at this point.
Yeah. 5 till 7, and they have 50 cents left or 50 pesos, some low amount.
They've got 250 left. 250.
Yeah. Yeah. And Curtin is like, well, that's not even enough to get one room, let alone 2 for the night to stay in, which Dobbs says, I know a place with rats and roaches,
It's only 50 centavos.
Yes. And this is where we meet, I can't remember, Howard.
Yep.
Walter Huston, right? John Huston's father.
Yep.
And
Academy Award winner for this movie.
Yeah.
The Huston family won 3 Oscars that night.
Yeah. I posed the question, is this the first and only time that a sibling directed a parent to an Academy Award win? And it's got to be, right? I mean, I couldn't think of anything else. And on top of that, it's got to be the only time probably that a director and a actor won an Academy Award for the same movie in the same year, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of
I
crazy.
have to imagine that there. I mean, like, so like Francis Ford Coppola probably put his dad someplace in the freaking Godfather or something, right? That whole
Right, but
damn movie is lousy with Coppola's. Yeah, that's
it
got a
didn't
real
win
Coppola
it didn't
problem.
win Best Actor.
No,
Yeah.
I think it is the only time where a child directed directed a parent to an Oscar win. Yeah.
And it's funny because he had to convince his dad to take the role because his dad is kind of prideful and didn't want to take a supporting role.
Interesting.
That
Yeah,
is kind of
but he
interesting
convinced
because
him.
he is right there with Humphrey Bogart as far as like just really going for it.
He steals every damn scene,
Yeah,
in
he
my
does.
opinion. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah,
in this movie.
he carries a lot of the film, right? Like when you start hating Dobbs and want to punch him in the nuts, it's
Yeah,
it's Howard that keeps you enjoying the movie.
Right.
he keeps everything jovial. Yep.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's doing with the group, right? He's the one who's kind of keeping it all together. He's the glue.
Yeah, because
and that proves out later when he's no longer part of that trio.
yeah, and he's waxing poetic about searching for gold, and the look on Dobbs and Curtin's faces while they're listening to him, their eyes get all big, and Howard's like, but gold changes a man, and makes him.
I wrote down
Changes
the
a
actual.
man's soul.
He says, "I know what
gold does to a man's soul," which I basically asterisked as this. That's the thesis statement of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says it's when the pile of gold starts to grow, that's when the trouble starts. But Dobbs, of course, is like, well, that would never happen to me. I'm above that. I'm a better man than that. And
I would only go for what I want. If all I wanted was 5,000, I'd take the 5,000 and leave the rest.
This is the kind of telegraphing that is
good.
Is what makes a great movie, right?
Yeah.
It's even before you probably sit down where this movie's going to go, right? But you really get a sense of, okay, now we know what's going to happen. The fun is seeing it happen, right?
Right.
There is no sin in telegraphing your story or your movie.
Nope. Not at all.
Especially if you can connect the dots the right way. And I think that's what makes this one of those movies that it's a director's director. It's a director's film. It's especially since John Huston wrote the screenplay too. It's how do you tell everybody what they need to know in the first 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
or 15 minutes or whatever, and how do you make it play out and still have surprises like with the lottery ticket.
Right.
But it also builds a sense of mystery and suspense in your mind. You hear that exchange, and yeah, like Chuck said, it's the thesis statement. You realize in that moment that's what this movie is about. And then it's fun to imagine as the movie progresses how that's going to play out. So it creates a little bit of extra tension in every scene, right?
Yeah, and it's great because I get so flustered with movies that have big exposition dumps to explain to you what's going on. It's like people just randomly spouting out facts about a planet or an area or, whatever. This is done so well because it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
And you can just take what you want out of it.
You are Dobbs and Curtin. You don't know anything about gold prospecting.
Right.
So you're being told, and you're listening to and I was sitting there thinking, it's like, well, that sounds goddamn great.
It sounds fun and dangerous, but
the reward will be worth the risk, as we find out from another character that comes along later.
Yes.
His statement, his thesis statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from here, they go up. They're just having a conversation around the well or around the fountain about how much it would cost to do this. We should do this instead of sitting around waiting for another job and yada, yada. And then they
as good as anything.
Yeah, as good as anything. And then they see McCormick walking down the street with his young Tampico love interest.
He was a
pretty
gold
lady.
digger too.
Yeah. Well, sure. Maybe she was a gold digger. We don't know.
Broke to broke. That's what Humphrey Bogart's saying.
Yep.
Broke to broke.
One of the
Kanye
best
West.
radio edits ever.
Kanye West wrote a song based on this scene of the treasure of the Sierra Madre. But so they see McCormick, and of course as he's been the entire movie, he's overselling himself. He's like, "Oh no, boys, everything's great. Let's go have a drink. It'll be fun, you know." And they go have a drink, and I think
then go back to the room, beat cheeks. I'm
Exactly.
going to get a drink.
I'll be there in a little bit.
Yeah. She gets frustrated and storms off. You know, yeah.
And Jason, I think this is a scene you said reminded you of something. I believe that's
so yeah. They basically demand their money, and the guy isn't going to pay up, but he's trying to delay. He's like, "I'll buy you another drink." He's like, "Leave the bottle," tells the bartender, and then he takes the bottle as he's pouring a shot for Fred Dobbs. He then takes the bottle and smashes it on him. Right?
Yeah.
It starts a brawl. So his plan now is just to fight his way out of this and not.
If we hadn't said before, he's an old man.
Yeah, he's an old guy, but he's big.
Yeah,
he is a big guy, but you think he's going to be all fat and slow. No, he totally beats the shit out of both of these men.
Yeah. The only reason they get the better of him is because they eventually just overwhelm him by the fact that they outnumber him. Yeah. But it reminded me of the scene in Oh Brother Where Art Thou with the Cyclops, John Goodman.
Oh yeah,
it very much reminded me of that.
I bet there's a line you can draw there.
I think you're probably right. Just the way he was swinging them around, and it was the physicality of the fight was very similar. Yeah.
And half of their recourse was to just try to grab him by the ankles and knock him down while he was beating the other one up.
Yeah, in fact, one of them even does kind of like the Tim Blake Nelson, and is like grabbing him by his feet. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't draw that comparison, and I bet there probably is something to that. Knowing the Coens, right? They would pay homage that way.
Absolutely.
Well, and Oh Brother is an homage of just about everything that probably made them who they are. You know?
Right, exactly.
So.
And so eventually they do, like Jason said, they get the best of them. Now there's a moment in the scene that I'm wondering about, because we'd already been set up that Dobbs is greedy, but he only takes what they're owed.
And they pay for the drinks.
Yeah, and they pay for the drinks, which I thought, well, maybe this is an indication that I don't have the right read on the situation, right?
Well, I think it does something. I thought the exact same thing, Chuck, and I even mentioned it to Susan. I was like, that's real honest and stand up, right? I mean, that's kind of it shows you that he does have some character, and I think that's important because you need to see that he has character to lose. He has to be set up as a character who could go either way, right? Is he going to make the right choice? Is he not going to make the right choice? And in those moments like that, you start to wonder. It's like, oh, maybe he is an honest person, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a great explanation.
Yeah, that is, and it's also it gets doubled down because they take the money that they've got and they go back to Walter Huston. And for some reason, I just wanted to say Walter Reed. I don't know why, but anyway, they go back to Walter Huston.
Where'd he come from?
Yeah, I don't know. And they say. Okay, well, we've got some money here, basically, and I think what they got is like $500.
Yeah,
or something.
Their idea originally is
150 each is what they got, and then Howard another 300.
Okay,
but they need about 200 more if they're going to really make a go of it to get the supplies that they need.
Yes,
and originally they were not.
Because they got to rent burros, they've got to have the camp stuff, they got to have the pickaxes, they've got to have the stuff to mine, to not just pick through a mountain, but to create a mine within the mountain. They got to have all these resources. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's something important to note here, because it's a funny scene later in the movie. Originally, they don't want to bring Howard with them because they figure he's old. He'll slow them down, right?
Yeah.
And they realize they don't have enough money and they don't have the experience. Maybe they do need somebody, but they end up short, right? They end up $100 or $200, like you said, Jason, short of being able to go.
I also before you say what happens next, I love when they ask Howard if he's interested, how immediate he is like, well, of course I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, this is my life.
This is what I do. Yeah.
He's already given like this cautionary tale, the night before that makes it kind of feel like he's sort of done with this, life. And then they ask him if he'd be interested. And he's like, of course. I'm gold prospector. Let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what he's in it for. And this tells you at this point that he really doesn't care about the money. It's the adventure or the process that he gets the most joy out of, right? He wants to come home with a little bit of money and just live out his life. But there's a critical scene later with that idea too. But and then Robert Blake, you said it was? Yeah, yes. Robert Blake. Robert Blake shows up and says, "Hey, mister, I sold you the winning ticket. Can I have a tip?" And he's like, "Yeah, get out of here, kid." Again. He's like, "No, I don't want to buy your ticket." And I think it's Curtin who's like, no, he's saying he sold you the winning ticket already.
Right. And then Fred's like, "Wait, kid, say the first thing again." It's like, you won. And he's like, "Well, hell, I'll give you," because it's like it was 10%. Well, it was a $2,000 win, I think, right, or something like that. And he's like, "Oh, I'll give you he gives him more than
it was 200 pesos, I believe.
Oh, okay. What he gives him more than the $20 tip or whatever.
Yeah,
and so basically they've got what they need, and they're all happy. They're ready to set out on an adventure, and a very, very telling shot of Curtin and Dobbs shaking hands with Walter Huston, and behind that, just kind of looking at that like, well, we'll see how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
End of Act 1. Also, he tells he stakes his buddy Bob Curtin.
Yep.
His half of the extra money that they need.
I'll stake you, and I don't even need. He basically makes it seem like, I'll stake you. I let's go. You don't have to pay me back. Because the prospect of what you could bring back would make what he owes small potatoes.
And what I'm staking you isn't going to make a difference in my life if I come back empty-handed.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what you've got now is you've kind of introduced to Fred C. Dobbs as kind of this schlub man of maybe questionable character, but he's been built up now to a man who is generous, to a man who is a partner, right? Who is honest, seemingly. And yes, but it's always in the back of your mind is that scene earlier where he's like, well, that wouldn't be me. Always in the back of your mind.
Right.
Also,
and okay, well, it's going to be real fun to see this unravel.
Yeah, something else happens though here too, because it builds Bob Curtin up as somebody different too. It builds him up as a tag along.
Yep.
And we find out later he does a ton of the work. A ton of the work.
Bob he could be at this point seen as the wild card, right?
Yeah, he almost seems like the guy that's like, well, he's the guy that, I don't know, I mean, maybe back then, I don't know, but the three of us were like, we don't know who that guy is. Humphrey Bogart's a hero, and Walter Houston's just a likable old man. It's like, this guy is going to be the guy who's going to go nuts or whatever. No, we find out that it's quite a bit different than that as we continue on.
Yeah, and the very next scene is the group on a train, right? Yep. And they are going to wherever they need to be dropped off to go into the Sierra Madres. But while that is happening, the train gets attacked by the banditos.
Yep, the banditos. We have banditos.
The banditos. Yep, and they're terrible shots. But as is wont in a movie, they have to be terrible shots.
Well, they do get some hits. They get very close on some hits.
Yeah, that that shot when they almost hit Dobbs.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm surprised he didn't get actually
Yeah.
injured by whatever mechanic they used to make that happen. You know, it looked really real.
Right. My
but
guess
they
is
happen to have.
I actually have an idea of how they did that. If anybody cares to hear that,
care.
My suspicion is that there was already a cut out piece of the side of that wall, and
they
then
popped it out.
They either popped it out with something on the other end or with an air gun, and so it just kind of shot out, and it creates a hole. But it's it looks, it's all movie magic. It probably wasn't.
You're ruining movie magic for me, Jeff.
Ruining the illusion.
Well, someday if we need to remake this movie, we need to know how to do that.
Yep. So then we get our next. I mean, this movie is full of Dobbs' character, like build up or tear down. Like every scene
this
has
is the
something
first
about
scene
him
where something goes where you get real suspicious of Dobbs.
Yeah, because they all defend themselves.
Yep.
Right, and they end up taking out a few banditos. Important to note, they noticed one guy who's wearing a gold hat, which we can't tell. We can't tell the difference on screen. That I couldn't anyway. Maybe there is some noticeable difference, but I couldn't tell. But anyway, at the end of that, after they've driven the banditos off, Dobbs immediately goes into a head count.
Yeah.
Like
I shot 3. How many did you get, Bob?
I shot 3 and nearly 2. And Curtin, you probably didn't get any. And oh man, I definitely shot better than you. You know, so there's that number counting. I have to be best.
He's starting
better.
He's writing the books now.
Yeah, he's taking inventory. He's taking
exactly.
stock.
It's like, it's one thing for a guy to come along and say, here's the money to stake us for this thing, but it might say something if all of a sudden now he was the night before saying, oh, it's fine, I'll stake you, and then the next day he's like starting to write the books on what he's done more than you. It's a
yeah. True team would have been celebrating their ability together to ward off the banditos.
Yep,
and that's definitely not the way it goes.
So wait. So I thought I only left for like 30 seconds. Where are we?
The train. That's the train scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they left from. We
already
at the
finished
end of the movie.
Yeah, we're at the end of the movie.
I wasn't sure which bandito fight we were talking about.
I love that there were so many banditos and so much of the mention of the federales. I love it when words like that are used, just used. It's like, oh, it's the federales.
Yeah. Oh, it's the federales. Oh, it's the banditos. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between the two.
The banditos do try to pass themselves off as federales later.
Yeah. So the next scene is one of my favorite joke scenes in the movie. They start their trek, right? They buy their burros. I should mention that because the burros are marked with a specific marking.
And there's a calligrapher who is setting the contract too. Because they got to bring those back. I mean, everything else is theirs, but they got to bring back the burros.
Yes, so they know what burros they had and who had them, etc.
Yep.
So they're out. They're out walking the first day, I think. And Dobbs and Curtin are they're done. You know, like they're so tired they can't go any further. And then you see Howard in the background, and I think the shot has to be sped up somehow. He's just hightailing up the mountain, and I don't know. Curtin kind of jokes with Dobbs. He's like, "Yeah, and you said he'd be the one that was, slowing us down."
That was slowing us down. Yep.
And he says, "That's when I took him for a normal human being." He's like, he has to be part goat or something.
Yeah, be part goat. Yeah.
That's so great.
And there was also a part here where, so yes, Dobbs and Curtin are so tired. They are not conditioned for this type of work. And they're drinking a lot of their water, and they are actually using the water when they think that they found gold.
Did that make you so anxious? I was so anxious about the.
Like, you're using all of your water.
Don't use the water.
Yeah, exactly. Because Dobbs is constantly pouring his water over these rocks to see the gold, quote unquote,
Yeah,
come through.
they call Mountain Goat Howard back to look at it.
Yeah, and he just
And
laughs and he's like, oh, that's fool's gold.
it's Formica, fool's gold. Yeah, he's like, quit pouring your water.
Yeah, because then he says,
Says sometimes water's more precious than gold.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And so, which also bears out at the end too.
Yep.
So then it's at this point in time, they make camp for the night. And this was also another good, funny scene where Curtin and Dobbs are just dead to the world.
Yeah. Really should have some beans, boy.
Yeah, Howard
is
shoveling the beans into his mouth. It's like, you want some beans? You really should have some beans. We got to go through some rough territory tomorrow. You want some beans?
We got a long day tomorrow.
And the guys are still asleep, so he puts down the thing. He starts playing the harmonica really loud,
Yep.
and it still doesn't wake them up.
Nope.
And sure enough, we go into the next day, and it's Dobbs and Curtin are not doing well.
Right.
Well, they want to give up.
They say, "Oh, screw it, let's go back and cash in what we had, cash in our deposits, basically."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dobbs says some really terrible things about Howard in this scene, and Howard's just laughing and laughing. He's like, "You guys are so dumb. You don't even realize you're I don't know the exact line. He's like, "But you don't realize."
He calls them dumb 8 different ways. It's hilarious.
He's like, "You're so dumb. You don't even realize you're standing on a fortune." Basically,
Right.
You're standing on gold right now. And then they're like, "Oh my God, yes!" You know, the look in their eyes is so great from both of them. Curtin and Dobbs have some great eye looks in this movie, like in multiple scenes.
But I will say, though, I think my favorite look is when Howard is dancing his little jig.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great.
Yeah, he's hilarious, man. He's so great in this movie.
He's just awesome. Doing what he loves. You know, it's like to the other guys, it's potentially survival, right? They see it as survival and hitting it big, and finally, after all their years of bad luck, it's paid off, right? It's the same thing that gamblers get into, right? Thinking that the longer you play, the longer you sit at the blackjack or the poker table, you've done the work so that it will eventually turn and you will win the big pot or whatever, right? And it's
right.
It's always folly, and Walter knows, or Howard knows, that it's folly. And
it's also beyond ludicrous to imagine these two even possibly doing this on their own.
Oh yeah,
like twice now. Like they would have tried to haul all of that pyrite back that they found the day before, and that would have been the end, and they would have been laughed at, and they would have just gone back to, bumming around Tampico.
Well, and they would always be remembered as kind of losers, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it doesn't. We then go into almost this is almost like a 5-act story, really, because we start to see paranoia begin to set in with Dobbs. However, what we get a lot of is actually seeing them actually legitimately mining and pulling thousands and thousands of dollars of gold out of this mountain.
I love this is I think when I think Dobbs is at his best. When they're doing the work and they're seeing results, and Dobbs says to Howard, he's like, I had just the complete wrong picture of what gold prospecting was in my head. He's like, I just thought it would be like picking up, rocks on the ground and getting rich. Yeah, he had no concept of what it actually took to work a mine and pan for gold. And you can see that he's enjoying himself. Right? He's doing hard work, but it's paying off, and he seems to be at his best right now.
But
Well,
they
yeah,
haven't
'cause-
started taking inventory yet.
Right.
Right.
That comes later. Yep.
Yes, and what we do start to see in this kind of middle section of the movie is Bob Curtin basically becoming the young Howard at this point. Like Bob is actually learning and doing a lot of work. Like at one point, he's working the whole sifting part by himself, almost effortlessly. Whereas before, you saw all three of them like really, really struggling to understand what this element is of the process. But yet, a little bit later, as the days pass, Bob Curtin is now becoming the and now every time I say Bob Curtin, every time I say Walter Huston, I think Walter Reed. Every time I say Bob Curtin, I think Bob Cajun. Anyway, so as
tell us what happens the first night that they have some gold to weigh out, because this is critical to everything that happens next. Is this scene?
Right? Well, yeah. So Howard is sitting there and measuring it out basically, and Dobbs in particular is like just watching it like a hawk, because he thinks that one of the other two guys are going to screw each other over.
Well, it's it's not quite there yet, I don't think. I think that it's when he asks what they should do with he's almost kind of feeling Walter out here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
He's kind of like because I don't even think he's thinking of this powder as money yet, right? It's sort of abstract in his mind. But then Walter, starts talking about, well, we could split it up now, and we could each keep our share now, or we could keep it all in one pile, and then split it up at the end when we sell it. And Dobbs the wheels start turning, and he starts to realize this is money, right? And then he says, well, I think we should separate it. And then Walter's like, well, okay, we can do that. But then he starts talking about, if we're all responsible for our own goods, is what he calls it, right? All the time, for our own goods. Then next thing you know, you're gonna start getting a little cagey about your goods and hiding your goods and not trusting everybody, with your goods or around your goods, So he starts Walter almost is sort of, he knows where this goes. So he's trying to give them the cautionary aspect of it, but he's also planting it in their heads that they can't trust each other now, right? And it's
almost like he is.
Did you really? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's almost as if he is setting up his own defense for the way he's going to act later.
Yeah,
Howard is doing that?
I think Howard is kind of doing that. I think Howard is the one who's telling them, the way they're going to start acting about protecting and hiding their goods. And it's almost like it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy where he knows it's going to end up this way anyway. Maybe he's just cutting out some of the steps to get there.
Yeah, I felt he was trying to talk them out of that situation while still being open to doing what they want to do, because he wants to keep the group happy. But he's like, we shouldn't do it this way because I know how this goes. I don't think he's planting any kind of idea
I think Howard has been through this cycle many, many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
He
has seen these two people come along every couple of years or so.
I just found it fascinating that in his caution, I think he also kind of exasperated the distrust.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly for Dobbs at this point.
For Dobbs, certainly.
Because Curtin's losing trust in Dobbs' character.
Yes.
Not the fact that he would take... Well, I guess it's kind of the same thing.
They kind of play on that a little later. You're not quite sure about Curtin yet.
Right. There's absolutely an important...
They leave him as a kind of a, what's going through his mind moment coming up soon. But they do decide to just split the gold every night, weigh it out, split it up, and be responsible for your own. Walter says something along the lines of, I keep calling Walter Howard. says something along the lines of, well, that's good. I didn't want to have to protect your all's goods anyway. Something
Right.
like that. Again, trying to like placate the group.
What they do is they each hide their gold someplace the other person doesn't know where it's at.
Mm-hmm. But this is when they first, you get the first sense that they are pitted against one another, right? Even though they're working together, this is a fracture of trust. And I also love the explanation that Howard gives about the difference between being honest and trustworthy here, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's here. Maybe it's a little later.
Yeah, it is, because he's talking about how they shouldn't trust the money to him, because if he decided to run with them, they would catch him. They're a lot stronger
Howard
now.
is no less honest than any of them, or more honest than any of them, but he's the most trustworthy because
he's the slowest.
Because he's the slowest,
right?
Basically,
right.
You could trust me not to get away. You can't trust me not to try, right? Or however that goes. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, that's all I really had to say on that piece. I feel like this is kind of like this critical moment,
right,
in the movie.
And I think the next moment is another critical one, because this is, I think, when we see, they might do a little more work first, but this is when we see Dobbs in the cave by himself, digging out, and then there's a tunnel collapse, right?
Yeah, cave-in. Yeah.
Cave-in, yeah. Thank you. And we see Curtin, his immediate reaction is to run towards him to find out what happened. But then he kind of stops and he looks in. And I think he maybe even turns around, or he maybe just hesitates. But eventually he yells Dobbs' name and he runs in to get him.
I think he turned around, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He makes a choice and then he thinks better of it. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to consider what the choice was, because for Curtin, I don't think he's being greedy when he first thinks maybe I should just leave him in there.
Well, also,
I think he's protecting himself.
Was this after the scene in which the Curtin tries to kill or uncover and kill the
no, this is before.
That's
dragon.
Later.
This is before, well before that.
Okay. I would say you were right, Chuck, if it came later. I think it's I think that it's honestly that scene that's there to give you a little bit of doubt in Curtin as an audience, but then to also see him possibly already overcome that the gold fever in the fact that no, I could leave him. I could make more money here in this whole endeavor and let Dobbs die, but I'm not going to do that. So now the audience is like, he's a good guy.
Right.
He's actually a good guy. He thought about it, but he didn't do it. He's a good guy. So it elevates him, his character.
Right.
And that becomes extremely important later when you see the degradation of Dobbs' character.
Yeah.
Because you can't have two shitheads.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah. In a group of 3, 2 shitheads would mean, yeah.
It would make the movie unwatchable.
Yeah.
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 Pretty much.
Yeah. Pretty much. I've seen some movies like that. Yeah.
Lots of shitheads.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by assholes here. But then, so one other thing comes up too, and this leads to one of my favorite, like one of, I think, the greatest comedy cuts and edits ever in movies. Curtin goes into town to get some supplies, right? And there is a gentleman from Texas who is asking some questions. He's asking some questions about what's going on. What are you doing there? Where are you going? What's going on? And he's a treasure hunter too, and he is every bit as down on his luck as we find out at this stage. He's not a bad guy. We find out later, spoiler alert, but he is every bit as desperate and down on his luck as where Fred and Bob started at the beginning of the movie. He just looks a little bit better and potentially talks a little bit or is annoying enough to seem like he might be a troublemaker. So and Bob is real good at basically trying to play off that no, we're I'm not finding any gold anywhere or whatever.
He says we're hunters. He didn't. Yeah, he doesn't.
Yeah, we're hunting. We've got pelts.
Yeah.
We're not. And he's like, well, there's hardly anything up there worth getting pelts for. Although Humphrey Bogart apparently really does believe there's a tiger in the Sierra Madre, which is impossible.
I think
Is
we're
it? I saw a
skipping.
tiger pelt. But yeah, go ahead.
I think we're skipping just a smidge ahead here with Cody. Before that, there is like their first real blow up about how much is enough, 25K, 50K, 75K a piece, right? And there's a moment where Dobbs essentially accuses Bob of kind of being the tag along, right? It's like, I staked your claim on this,
right? Yeah,
and Bob says, you know what, you're right, and he pays him out the 100 in gold plus interest that he owes him or whatever, right? And 150, he says 150 in plus interest, and to show you, I think, two things about where Dobbs's character and his sanity is going. He throws that in the fire. It's $150 worth of gold. $150 was what he beat a guy up in a bar for, a few weeks ago.
Right.
Right. But he throws in the gold. He's like, well, I just didn't want to be called, I forget what it was. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember the word, whatever it was. But yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so that's a pretty big dust up. And from there, the relationship between Bob and Fred Dobbs is very, very strained, and that plays out in the scene next with the Gila monster.
Right. Yeah. And
so if you want to talk about the Gila monster, if one of you wants to pick that, then we can get into Cody, I think.
Yeah. So the Gila monster. Bob sees a Gila monster go into what appears to be a dugout piece of land underneath a rock, and he goes to flip over the rock and get rid of the Gila monster. Right. Well, of course, Dobbs sees this, and he becomes very perturbed by it. He pulls a gun.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you doing? You're trying to get to my stuff or whatever, or I think he's trying to play off that his stuff isn't there, because remember, they're supposed to be separating all of this stuff out.
Right. But they each have their hiding place.
Right. But Bob is pretty sure this is Dobbs' hiding place. And Dobbs thinks, oh, you're going to turn this over and you're going to take my stuff. I see how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, but he's like, no, I saw a Gila monster there. And Dobbs goes to, he's like, there's no Gila monster. And it's like, well, then put your hand under there.
It's a great scene. He's eggs him on. He's like, I know, I really want to see this. Put your hand in there. And he starts talking.
You're not yellow,
he starts talking to Howard. He's like, it's true, right? When a Gila monster bites down, it never lets go, right?
Yeah, even if you cut his head off.
Talks about the excruciating pain of death and everything. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, even if you cut its head off, it won't let up until sunrise or something like that.
Yep.
It's like, but then you'll be dead.
If you're lucky to be alive by then, yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, isn't that right, Howard? And he's like, well, I reckon so. Or whatever. I reckon that's true. But anyway, so Dobbs ends up kind of balking at this point. Mm-hmm. They flip the rock over, and of course the Gila monster is there, and it's kind
Guns are pulled. Guns are pulled. You didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, they had Dobbs had a gun on him. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so they flip that over, and it's like, yep, there's Dobbs' gold, and there's the Gila monster, kind of like almost like they're the monster's eggs.
Yeah.
But then so Bob shoots the Gila monster, and it's like, well, I told you. It's like basically it was a knowingly, like, dude, you're losing it. It's like you're not doing too well.
His paranoia is definitely starting to become a liability,
a real problem. Yes. So now Curtin has gone to town. He comes across James Cody. And he, Bob does whatever he can to basically keep Cody from following him or just get lost. Jesus Christ, this guy is asking all these questions, just refusing to take anything that Bob says for real. And so that he gets back to the camp, and it's later
he's
that
not buying the story that they're hunters at all.
Right. Well, they're at the camp at night, and this is one of my favorite cuts ever.
Yeah, this is great.
And they're sitting there, and it's like, he's talking about, it's like, this guy, Cody, he was asking all these questions. And I'm pretty sure he followed me back. And Fred Dobbs says, well, how do you know he followed you? And Bob's like, because he's right there, and it cuts, and he's standing right fucking there. and it starts this kind of uneasy set of scenes where it's like, well, what do we do? It's like if we none of them are at the point yet where they really want to kill anybody. They certainly don't want to kill an outsider. They may be at each other's throats, but they're not really. There is still a shred of humanity, because Dobbs, while he does come to the decision that this is what has to happen, and it's forced to be voted on,
let's set this up.
The setup for this is really good. Yeah,
let's set this up, because originally Dobbs is like, you can sleep here. You're our guest tonight. We'll give you food, but in the morning you're gone. Right? And they decide to have Howard watch them, and they're going to take turns watching them throughout the night. When they wake up in the morning, Dobbs goes out to him and notices he's drinking coffee. And he's like, this guy's stealing water from us. And he punches him. And Cody doesn't overreact. He's basically like, I'll give you that one. I'll allow you that one. But the way I see this, you have 3 options.
Yep.
You can let me go and risk me reporting you, which they're not there legally. They don't have a claim to the land. They're there legally. So
they could file a claim. They talked about this earlier, but if they do, it will essentially just put the stake on the radar of the big gold mining companies, and they'll come in and make an excuse that it's their land anyway.
Yeah, they'll tell them, we already made a claim here, and get the fuck out.
Yeah, their lawyers will just bury them. Yeah.
Yep. So
probably not even their lawyers, probably your toughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Option 2 is to allow him to join, right? And if he joins, he will not take any of the money or ask for anything that they've already gotten. This seems like a really reasonable idea, right? They get 1 extra man to work with them, and blah. The third option is to kill him, right? And they're like, well, hey, stranger, do you mind if we talk about it for a minute? That kind of cracked me up a little bit.
Yeah.
They asked him if he minded. He goes up. He goes up. He's like, I have to tend to my burros anyway.
But he makes the case that killing him's not a good option, because what are they going to do when the next guy comes? They're going to kill him too?
Right, they're just going to kill everybody.
Right.
Yeah. But they do talk about it, and Howard's like, well, let's vote on it. Right. Howard said he'd prefer not to kill anybody, but he's not against it. Right. And
if it comes down to it, he's going to have to do what he has to do.
I also like when he's making his case, number 2 is actually kill him, and number 3 is take him on as a partner. And when he gives them the pitch for taking him on as a partner, they said, well, you're making a real good case for number 2.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Which is exactly what Taco Bell tells me every time I have it. Making a real good case for number 2.
You're making a run for the bathroom instead of the but he goes up. He's like, I need to tend to my burros while you talk about it. He walks up, and he's standing on a ledge, and they vote. And Curtin says, we have to go with number 2. Yep. So they all take their guns out. They walk up, and I think Cody says something like, oh, you decided on X, huh? Well, you might want to take a look at this.
Take a look at this.
And also, it's interesting how the vote broke down. The vote went, obviously Dobbs was for killing him, and Howard was for taking him on. The deciding vote was Bob, and Bob went to kill him. Yeah.
which is interesting.
Which I think weighs on his conscience later. Yep.
Yep.
It does. And I think that it's, but I mean, to be honest with you, what are the other options like? I mean, none of them are good options.
No.
I mean, taking him on as a fourth guy is one thing, but it is one more guy that they have to.
His pitch was reasonable, though.
It's reasonable,
he said,
but
everything that you've taken in already is yours. I'll only take a share of what we get from here on out. But you're right. It's another mouth to feed. It's another guy that might not be trustworthy that's going to steal their shit.
Exactly.
Right. And I think what ultimately turns Curtin towards killing him is because both these things are true. If they kill a guy, they have to kill everyone else that comes. But if they take on a guy, they have to take on everybody else that comes.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's every choice was a lose-lose situation, really.
Yep. But what ultimately happens is there are banditos coming. And they have this.
You've been
cool
banditoed.
Yeah, banditos. They at first, like, one of them is like, they might be federales, but eventually.
Well,
Cody's
somebody
like, no,
says they don't look like federales to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curtin agrees with Cody that they're probably banditos. So at this point, they're like, okay, well, let's clean up camp, hide everything in the ridge. Cody, you stay up here and let us know when they're coming. It might be an hour or something.
So let's all get something to eat because we're going to probably need it.
Yep. And this leads.
Well, Howard is always eating.
Howard's like, beans, boys, we're going to be in a fight. Eat the beans. And he starts playing his harmonica.
Doing a jig.
Yep, doing a jig. God, he's just such a fun-loving dude, that Howard.
He is. He's delightful.
But they end up setting up these little bunkers, right? Holding their pistols and shotguns, whatever. Eventually, the banditos get there. And this is a scene I did not expect in this movie, and it has a line that I've been quoting like my whole life.
Well, but the thing is, it's one of the all-time great misquoted lines too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So
I'm going to get it wrong. If you know it right, you tell this story because I'll say it wrong.
Well, go ahead and start in because I got to find the actual line now.
Yeah. So the the banditos come up, and they're kind of milling around, talking about if they're going to leave.
I have it, Jeff, if you need it.
Go for it. Okay, you got it.
Howard was like, yeah, they might leave. They might stay. And Curtin's like, should we start shooting? He's like, no, let's wait to see what they do. And then they walk up and see Dobbs. And then go ahead with what happens next.
So what people commonly misquote this as is, we don't need no stinking badges. That's what usually is used in parody, is played on, but it's incorrect. It's badges. We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges. Yep. That is the full line.
That's because they were pretending they were federales, and Dobbs is like, well, if you're federales, show me your badge.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is the right thing to do. If you are suspect of somebody saying they are police or government agents or whatever, you probably need to ask for that badge, especially if they look like banditos.
Wearing gold hats.
Yeah.
And it's important to note, too, that
they recognize the gold hat, too.
Yes, they do recognize the gold hat. They also, Howard had previously explained that if banditos comes, they don't care about gold. They just want your weapons and jewelry, basically. So they ask Dobbs for his gun. And he's like, well, I'm not giving you my gun. He's like, they walk back. It's kind of comedic the way the scene plays out. You know, they walk back, they talk, meaning the banditos. They come back and they're like, okay, well, you don't have to give us your gun. We'll trade you for this watch. Right? And he's like, no, I think I'll keep my gun. And then the conversation goes on. And I can't remember if it's Curtin or Howard. Somebody shoots the watch out of
it was
the dude's hand.
Yes, I don't know if it was Howard or I want to say it was Howard because that was the guy that earlier it's like, oh, you were missing everybody earlier, and he hit a fucking swinging watch.
Right.
Or something.
Yeah,
it might have been Bob, but I think it was Kurt, or I think it was Howard.
And the Banditos aren't super smart because this is when the first time they realize, oh shit, there might be more than one guy here. And they go back and they talk again. They have their little conversation.
They shot the fucking watch. What are we doing?
Yeah, they shot the watch. Should we leave? Should we fight? And then they decide to fight. And then this cool, gunfight takes out. And Cody, again, is on their side, at least helping them fend off.
Well, yeah, because they need a fourth guy against the whole band of banditos.
Band of banditos.
Yeah, well, I think that is the actual.
And what's Cody going to do? He's got to pick a side. And he's not going to choose the banditos because they're gonna kill him anyway. So
right. So it's like, well, and at this point, you think also that they are warmed up to Cody at this point too. Because Cody's not interested in double crossing them. He wants to help them fend off the banditos, which we find out a little bit more later that it's even more so that they start to warm up to, or at least Bob really warms up to Cody.
But they don't get really a whole lot of opportunity to warm up to him.
Well, no, it's posthumous because he ends up getting shot in the throat. And he's because what ends up happening is that the banditos stop firing and you start hearing them build something. And it's like, well, what is this? And Howard's like, well, it's an old Indian trick. It's you basically you're building slats that you can fire through, but you can't be hit. So it's a more sturdy, and it also people don't know where you're shooting from. So it's basically a trick that they learned from the Native Americans or the Indians in the area, and so they call out to Cody. He doesn't respond. So Bob goes to check on him and he's dead. He was shot through the throat, but he grabs his gun and comes back. And all of a sudden the building stops and they think, well, that was awfully quick. And what's going on? And we find out that the federales have come to basically round up the banditos.
Yep.
So they get saved at this point, and they don't have to pay any consequences except for that fourth guy, which they were going to kill, which actually ends up kind of easing their consciousness, their consciences for a little while. But they realize that he's got a little bit of money, and he's got a note from his wife, and this is really pretty sad.
It is very sad
because Cody is, like I said, he basically is at the same spot at the start of Bob and Fred's arc, right? Except for he's already a better person, and he actually has something outside of personal wealth that he's doing all of this for. And it's just this long and just depressing letter from his wife, basically saying, I'm glad you said that this was the last time you were going to go out. And as much as I do hope you find something that doesn't replace, you being here with us and your kids. And, your kids are asking when you get to come back and why you had to go and all of that. Which is interesting because obviously Curtin and Howard are reacting to that like human beings. Dobbs is like, oh, what a shame. Okay, let's get, I guess we should probably put him in a hole and, get back to work or whatever. He doesn't give a shit. At this point, he's gone. He is no longer holding on to too much. He doesn't even grieve for this guy or the guy's family. Bob, that carries with him. Big
right.
time.
Yep.
Yeah, Bob and Howard decide to give 25% of their gold to his wife, Cody's wife.
To which Dobbs is like, fuck that.
Oh, he scoffs at that. He thinks that they're just the dummies, biggest dummies in the world for wanting to do that. But at least it obviously, spoiler, it doesn't really play out. But but they do definitely say that that's what they're going to do to kind of honor Cody, especially since he probably helped save their lives, and they're like you said, just deeply affected.
It was one of us. It was one of us. If it wasn't him,
it was one of us. Yep.
And the only real effect this has on Dobbs is that he's like, maybe we should just accept our winnings and get the hell out of here, because they're at 35,000 a piece now.
The mine is starting to dry up. The mine's starting to dry up. They're at 35,000 each. Yep.
Which is, I mean, because the idea, like, think about this. In that era, $35,000 is probably the rest of their life.
Easily.
Comfortably.
Absolutely.
Comfortably the rest of their lives, especially if they stay in Mexico. I know, though, the Bob Curtin wants to go back to America, though, at some point. But
he wants to start a peach farm.
Yes. And so, but still, the concept of, I mean, like, shit, for Howard, he was saying that only a couple of thousand would have set him for the rest of his life, probably.
Yeah.
It turns out that he doesn't need anything in the long run because his character ends up basically paying the bills for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and
that is there is a nice early scene where they talk about what they're gonna do with their fortune, and Bob talks about his experience on the peach farm, singing with the migrant workers and working on the farm and how lovely that was, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to start his own peach farm. Howard just wants to live out the rest of his days, in this relative comfort. He doesn't have to work again. He's an old man. This is his last venture, right? And then Dobbs, his basic plan was to a Turkish bath, then order one of everything at a fancy cafe, and then send it all back and chew out the waiter.
Even if it's perfect.
And then they asked him, well, what else? He's like, what? He had no.
What else
thoughts.
Is there? He's like, what else is there?
Yeah.
And that's when the
short-term goals. Yep.
That's when the whole money payback money thing happened earlier with Curtin. The next scene I thought was kind of cool, and I don't know if this is something that prospectors would do back in the day, but Dobbs and Curtin are ready to go, and Howard's like, no, we have to put Mother Earth back the way she was. She gave to us. Now we need to give back to her.
Yep. This mountain
right.
We wounded this mountain, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Now we need to fix her up.
Yep.
And then, so they do all that, and then they have the funny thanks mountain scene.
I love that. Thanks mountain.
Howard thanks the mountain. The other guys are like, thanks mountain.
Well, this is also Dobbs basically makes fun of the idea too. He's like, "Oh, you're treating that mountain like it's a woman. Who cares?"
Yeah. Right.
And this is oddly an environmental movie. 30 years.
The line.
Yeah.
The line Dobbs says when they talking about giving 25% to Cody's widow, he says, "You two guys must have been born in a revival meeting."
Yeah. Yes.
That's beautiful.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
So the next thing is that they're starting to head back, right? Did anyone else have anything here?
Nope.
No. Thanks,
they're
Mountain.
starting to. Thanks, Mountain. So they're starting to head back, and there's a really awesome shot that I just love. It's almost like a horror movie shot. They're sitting around camp, and they're talking about whatever, and Howard might be playing his harmonica, and then you go from behind a dude holding a machete in his right hand. It looks very, very menacing, like horror movie. It just looked really cool. But they sit down. I'm very unsettled this scene. They share tobacco, to which in my mind I'm certain they've given them some kind of drug other than tobacco to knock them out and steal their shit.
Hey, Jason. Let's not ever take Chuck on a prospecting trip.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant by Huston. It's the way that they set the shot with him standing there with the machete made me uneasy the rest of the way, right?
Chuck would be the first one up the mountain with his bionic knees and he'd be doing a jig.
Oh God, dude, I would be miserable in the desert. Shit.
I'd save y'all's lives. But it turns out that one of the man's boys has fallen in water. He's still alive, but he won't come to. Right. And I don't know if it's like the idea of a white American would be able to save a kid. Like, I don't know if there's some kind of, I don't know. It's just weird to me. Like, they had reverence for him even before he saved the kid.
I actually have an idea here. I think one, Howard could speak their language, and two, Howard was an older person. It may have been kind of the respect for an elder type of idea. Can you come and help? And he said, yeah, I could probably take a look and see. Yeah, I mean, assuming that the immediate reverence for him was probably from an elder perspective.
Right.
My guess.
I can jive with that for sure. So Howard goes to their camp, or to their village. I guess it's a village. And he's doing something that obviously is like not going to save the boy. Like, he's just taking his arms from his stomach over his head and back.
He moves his arms like he's pumping water out of him, and then he sits him up, and then the kid comes to.
Yeah, he put a little tequila in his mouth too, I think.
I probably.
He did put
that'll wake the dead.
His mouth. Yeah. So the kid comes to. Everyone thanks him. He walks back. Curtin and Dobbs during that time had a minor fight. I think about how, I don't know, they had a minor fight about something, so things aren't going good with them. But Howard goes back. The next day, they begin to travel again. And while they are traveling, the townspeople come back. Yep. And are like, hey, we need to pay you your respects. So you need to come back.
The gods will be angry.
The gods will be angry, which Howard explains, like, they're prepared to take me back by force if necessary.
To which Dobbs is like, get the fuck out of here, blah, 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 blah. And then they fucking pull their machetes on him. And it's like, hey, stop that, Dobbs.
Howard's like, that's not going to work. I have to go.
Yeah.
They don't care about you two.
Yeah, they don't care. But you two don't have to go. So they're like, Curtin, in his character is like, well, we'll take your stuff. We'll keep it safe. And we'll just press on ahead and meet you in
Durango.
So,
almost immediately, Dobbs is like, that sucker. And he
what an idiot. Let's take his shit and let's go.
Let's take his shit and go. Like, he's full weasel at this point. Like, holy crap, really? He's beyond probably redemption at this point by even mentioning the possibility of screwing over Howard, right?
Right.
That is low down dirty.
He is dead set to screw over Howard. He's not asking or suggesting it. He is now dead set on it. Yep. So he, because he's like, yeah, we're going to take his stuff. And Curtin's like, what, dude? No, whatever.
He's using paranoia as his rationale.
Can we take a moment to just talk about how great a weasel Bogart is? Like, his degradation and paranoia, him talking to himself, his complete and utter like transformation into just this almost unrecognizably despicable character, right? Dude, he is just sneering and cackling, and just he plays insane and just low down dirty shit so well in this movie.
Did anybody else wonder if this was an inspiration for like some of Jack Nicholson's roles?
I mean, I would have to think that it was at least on the radar for Jack Nicholson, right?
Because one thing that Jack Nicholson's really, really good at is looking like he's deranged, right? Like he messes up his hair, he dishevels his clothing or whatever, and that's
I feel like it's got to be a performance that has been looked at by many people.
yeah,
over the
and that
years.
is happening to Bogart here. He grows out a beard, he becomes dirty, his clothes are ripped and torn. He's he's gotten skinnier. He looks diseased by greed essentially, and by being a bad guy. Yeah, he does not like there are moments in the early parts, even before he gets his haircut, where he seems like just a guy who's down on his luck. In this, he is twisted now by the end of it.
And he does. I mean, what does he do? Next thing he does when Bob isn't going to get on board with Dobbs's plan, Dobbs decides, well, it's time to get rid of you. And he marches Bob off at gunpoint, and he shoots him twice,
times.
Shoots him once, comes back and shoots him again. This is one of those scenes where it's off camera and it's effective. It's one of those like effective Hays Code moments, right, where you imagine your mind kind of fills in the blanks for you.
Yeah.
But you kind of imagine it would have shot this differently if he weren't restricted by censors.
Right. Well, certainly a scene at the end, the big climax.
Oh, most definitely. That's the big
changed.
Yeah. That's the big one. The beheading.
Yeah. But
when he goes. Oops, sorry.
No, I was going to say.
But then after
immediately
back to
he
the
comes
fire.
back, he's starting to talk to himself like, maybe I didn't do that right. Maybe I need to go back and shoot him more or whatever.
And the flames, the
way the
flames
flames
from the
build
fire
up.
consumes the whole frame of the shot. Oh, it's beautiful.
So good. It's so good. That's one of the 3 shots that I marked down. The first being the knife. There's other great shots in this movie.
Yeah.
The first being the knife, then the fire, and there's one that's excellent here in a little bit that I loved a lot.
Yeah.
So then we get a little bit of this movie is just beautiful for giving you balance.
Yeah, because it cuts to what's Howard doing? Yeah.
Oh my God, he's in a hammock.
Fed grapes.
He's getting fed grapes. He's getting fed tequila shots. He's licking salt off of the lovely villager daughter, lady. And then they hand him a baby pig to cuddle. He's living a good life. He's like, this is great.
So the next day comes and we also see well, it's not even the next day. Overnight, we see that Bob's not dead.
Right.
He crawls away. He was really only shot in the shoulder, it looks like, or something like that.
Yep.
It was that actually Dobbs was right. He didn't do it right. And maybe he should have gone back, but he also is fighting against the things that make him want to snap out of this by seeing his friend on the ground dead or dying or whatever. He fights against that so that he doesn't have to go and see that. He should have gone back, but he didn't. If he was really going to kill Bob, he should have gone back, yet he didn't. Bob crawls off. And then
he has the same internal struggle the next morning.
Right. It's like,
the
tiger took him off. It's like, what fucking tiger is
But he's
that?
like, there's buzzards.
There's buzzards. I got to go back because the buzzards will lead the federales to the body, and then they'll blame me. So he does eventually go back, and then he's like, oh, the body's gone, and he does. He blames it on the tiger, this crazy tiger that has never been seen.
He also apparently killed a tiger earlier when he was talking to Cody.
Yeah.
He's like, I bagged a tiger and 3 leopards or something, whatever he got.
It's like,
that was to cover for their hunting story. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but another tiger.
The tiger, yeah.
Right, but
and that's when Cody's like, there's no fucking tigers in these hills.
Yeah. So I'll give you a mountain lion or a bobcat. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Possibly in the mountains, but not a fucking tiger or a leopard.
The only tiger in that mountains was Dobbs himself.
Exactly.
Yes,
and I think that was probably the symbology, or at least something that we can draw the line to. Gold star, Chuck. Very good.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I'm good with these things.
Yeah. Anyway, so Yeah, so he carries on satisfied apparently that the tiger went off with the body. Meanwhile, Bob does get to the tribe,
The village.
to the village.
Yeah,
The Indian village.
Yeah, and he explains to Walter Houston that it's like, hey, Dobbs has gone nuts. He shot me, whatever. And Howard doesn't immediately get angry or want to go after him or anything. They talk it out, basically. They patch up Bob and they just kind of talk it out, which shows that these two guys are definitely on the level and they definitely see each other as friends.
Mm-hmm.
And which is not at all what Dobbs was interested in the second half of the movie.
And in fact, Howard just wants to go off on his own to get their goods back.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to leave him to heal.
To convalesce, right? And Bob's not having that. He's like, no, I'm coming with you. You're not stopping me. I have business to finish with Dobbs. Yep.
But then here's the next great scene for me, unless somebody wanted to talk about him getting water. So he's leading the burros. It's all disheveled, like he's
caked in dirt.
Yeah, he's half dead, it seems like, almost. So he stops at this little lake outside this little stream outside some ruins.
It's not actually ruins. It's the gate to Durango.
Oh, they called it ruins in the film. So that.
Oh, well, yeah, but it's the ruins just outside of the city of Durango or whatever, because you go through that and you get to the city of Durango later.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Because that's where they take the banditos go in that way, and later Howard and
Dobbs and
Bob go through there,
or Curtin and Howard.
Yeah.
So he goes to the water. He's drinking. One of the burros is drinking. He's washing off his face, and all of a sudden you see the reflection of the gold-hatted bandito in the water.
And by the way, go ahead, Chuck. Go ahead and finish that.
All I was going to say is it's shot so perfectly. It's so
because I
awesome.
was wondering is that even real? Is he being haunted now by his travels? No, he's being haunted by the real guy, who, by the way, Goldhat's hat is just as starting to fall apart as Dobbs is.
Right. So they survived the federales, but they have nothing.
Yeah.
They have nothing. And there's a little fight here, right? And maybe you guys can explain. I didn't really get, I guess, the haze.
So there's a couple things
changing the scene.
Yeah, so a couple of things happen. First, Dobbs pulls his gun, thinking, there's three of them, but I have a gun. Well, he didn't reload his gun after he emptied it on his friend, which is in a sort of, you could say that's a little bit of a...
karmic?
It's a little karmic. It's a little comeuppance. And then he gets bum rushed, thrown to the ground, and you see him get hacked at by Goldhat. Now, in the book, he's decapitated, I believe.
Mm-hmm. They shot it, too. They shot it that way as well.
Yeah, they shot it that way, too, because it is a gruesome murder in the book that ends up. And basically, it was not yay for the banditos. It was... that's his real comeuppance, is that, he became an animal and now he's going to be slaughtered like one. And
Humphrey Bogart was pissed about that too.
Yeah.
He was like, what's wrong with showing a guy getting his head cut off?
Oh, okay. That's amazing.
I bet he said that after a couple of drinks quite often too.
Most definitely.
But yeah, in the Hays Code era, everything was scrubbed real clean. So there was a shot like that, but I think it was probably Warner Brothers who said, like, there's no way we can keep that, and he had an alternate cut.
I wonder if that film's out there somewhere. That would be interesting.
I'm sure that the footage is probably somewhere, unless it got trashed. I guess it could have gotten trashed, but...
or burned in those fires in California a few years ago. I can't remember what was there when that was it Paramount or Universal. Somebody's building got burned down. They lost a lot of film,
but it wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been the studio. necessarily. It's the Hays Code. I mean, that was just all the studios
Well, but I mean, I
were
think,
at the mercy of the Hays Code.
but
No,
I
my
think
point was the
stu-
footage.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
go
I
ahead.
was talking more to Jeff.
Oh
Oh,
no,
sorry.
what I was saying was that it was probably, it's like, all right, well, I've got this shot, I've got this version, but like Warner was probably like, there's no way you can put that in there. We can put it together and then send it to the Hays Code to be.
Well, yeah. Warner Brothers. Oh, this is interesting. Warner Brothers publicity department actually released that statement that Humphrey Bogart was pissed because the studios had been kind of fed up
Yeah.
with the Hays Code in general. Yeah.
Oh,
So
it was horrific.
there was an all out war between them and the Hays Code for sure.
Oh, it was yeah. I mean, it was a really bad fight because I mean, there was censorship before the Hays Code. It's just that nobody ever really stopped anything.
And it was a little more self-censored. Yeah.
It was, and like, but yeah, you can tell if you look at the 3 or 4 Universal horror movies that were made before 1934, it's a whole lot different than the ones that came out afterwards. And
Most
in fact, in 1934, also Universal's like, well, we're just not going to make any more horror movies. It was kind of out. It was something that also the Hays Code didn't help. And it's like, well, we can't make these movies anymore, so we don't really want to make them anymore. But Bride of Frankenstein changed that. But still, it's a completely different movie and a completely different tone than the movies that came out before the Hays Code.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a shame because while the rating system is flawed, it certainly was able to allow directors to do more of what their vision was. So
Certainly, yeah. Okay, so what happens? Let's wrap this sucker
so
up.
yeah. So here we go. Speed round. So Dobbs is dead. The Banditos go into town with his burros and his supplies, with the thought of we can sell these pelts. What they don't realize is that what they think are bags of sand is actually gold, and that's what they should have kept and told everything else to go fuck off.
Yeah, they ripped the bags open and left them on the ground outside of the ruins or gate.
Right.
The ruins.
The ruined gateways.
But yeah, they get found out because of the markings on the burros.
Yep. If they had just taken the bags, they would have been fine. But no, they took the other stuff and left the most valuable thing, which would have probably kept them free, basically.
So this obviously gets them arrested by the Federale, and it harkens back to the earlier scene with Cody and Cody telling Bob about how the Federale work, and they execute you immediately. You dig your own grave.
You dig your own grave,
and then they shoot you and you're dead, and you fall in your grave. So that's what they do to Gold Hat. They take him out to the ruins, him and his remaining banditos. They've dug their graves. They're lined up. This is actually great use of Hayes showed ingenuity. They're lined up against the wall, but you can't see them because they're out of the shot.
One thing you can see is Gold Hat's hat.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm getting. That's a good use of ingenuity here. The Gold Hat's hat is on the ground, and you see his arm come out of frame, and he grabs. And it's almost like wait, and he grabs the hat.
Yeah, and he says, "Can I get my?"
That's right. He says, "Let me get my hat." He grabs his hat. He gets back out of frame. You can't see him behind the wall, and then they're shot. So the man wanted to die with his gold hat on. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's like because he actually even refers to it
funniest murder I've ever seen.
Execution is funny. Anyway,
it's funny.
No, so at that point, then into town comes Howard
and Howard,
Bob, and they find out what happened. They find out that the Banditos were captured. They're going to dig. Actually, I think they come into town before they get executed. But they just want their stuff. It's like, yeah, we don't give a shit about the crazy person that was with us and who's now dead outside the town. We just want our supplies. We want our stuff. They take him to the little holding area where all the stuff that was confiscated. and it's Curtin who's going through, and it's like, it's not here, it's not here. What is this? What's not? So they decide to go back out to town. But as they were looking through their stuff, a sandstorm came along,
A norther.
a norther.
Yeah.
And the little old lady from Star Wars Episode 1 was telling Annie that he better hurry because his bones are
Oh
aching.
God. Oh,
That's the first thing I think of every time I see a sandstorm, is that little old lady
God.
with that stupid line. Anyway, my bones are aching. Anyway, so they go out. They can't see anything. They can't find anything. The wind is everywhere. We see on the ground everything is blowing away, which that's a great shot too, because it's like,
yeah, it is.
hey, by the way, yeah, all of this was for naught in the long run.
Mhm.
It was it was a stupid thing to think that everything was going to turn out okay, or that you were going to get that money for basically nothing.
But it's not a waste of time, though, because
No.
the true treasure
Yes.
of the Sierra Madre, other than the gold, is what Howard found in that village.
Yep.
For him, is his treasure. He gets to go live out the rest of his life in, as a king, basically.
Yep.
Medicine man. Yep.
And you get the sense, you don't know for sure, but Curtin is also going to get what he wants, because Cody's wife lives on a farm, grows fruit, and Howard's like, maybe you should still go see her, even though there's no gold.
Yep.
So in my mind, he goes there, they fall in love, and this is his treasure.
Absolutely.
For their expedition.
Sure. And he's learned a lot about himself, about his character, about a lot about himself. He's come out of this a better man. And he, like what he says too, you kind of get that, really rings true when he says, all I'm out is a couple $100 when it really comes down to it.
Yep.
Right.
And by the way, we completely glossed over the fact that when they find the empty bags, the only thing the only thing that Howard can do is just lose it. He is just laughing so hard, and he kind of hits Bob on the arm. It's like, come on, man, this is too good. You got to join.
If you can't laugh at this joke, then
it's
I like it too. Howard also tells Bob, he's like, well, you've got at least 3 or 4 more fortunes in you. You're young.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. But no, I mean, it does. So when they go their separate ways, you see that there was actually a bag of gold that was not destroyed, but it is.
Was it? I was wondering about that, because it's sitting against the cactus.
It was. Yeah.
It looks like it got blown around, but maybe it wasn't open.
It wasn't open.
It wasn't opened.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was just basically dropped there. It was, so there was something left, but at the end, it didn't really matter. That was not that. Again, the treasure. I mean, like,
that was not the treasure.
Yeah, I mean, Howard, like you said, was going to live like a king. So he basically has nothing that money would have done for him. That he wasn't going to get by just sitting a kid up. That I'm surprised nobody else thought of. It's like just sitting the kid up restarted him.
What happens though when he's not able to save the next kid? I feel
it doesn't matter. He's the legislature.
That visual.
Well, no, he said
he's legislator.
That's right.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds good.
It sounds good. Yep.
He says, and I'm it.
And I'm it.
They have a legislature, and I'm it.
But he did say, though, that a medicine man, it's like they just want an old guy to tell them good things. Basically. Yeah. Tell them what they want to hear. That's all he's got to worry about.
Yep.
So good stuff. That is an excellent, excellent film.
This is very, very good.
This is definitely way up in the echelon of stuff we've talked about and covered.
Yeah.
I can see why it's in the AFI Top 100.
Yes. Why they reconfigured that list only 9 years later, I have no idea. But it is something that among the directors who say that this is among their favorites, you have people like where was it?
Oh, Sam Raimi,
Stanley
Gilliam,
Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick, Spike Lee.
Spike Lee said that that's one of the movies you need to watch if you want to become a director. Paul Thomas Anderson, Vince Gilligan.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, these are Paul Thomas Anderson. Watch this movie at night before bed while writing There Will Be Blood. So
awesome. And I could, now that you say Vince Gilligan, not to drag this on, I can totally see Walter White as a type of Dobbs.
Yep, that's exactly what it says here.
He cited him as the key influence for
there you go.
White.
There you go.
Yep. So this is good stuff. I think it's such a simple movie while a lot of little things happen, right? Like it's, guys go on a treasure hunt, they find it, they end up not, they end up basically not getting it the way that they thought. However, it's the character part of it that I think really it's a little bit also it's the character part and also the idea of you're told everything you need in the first 20 minutes. You just got to wait and see it play out at that point.
Yep.
Very effective.
Yeah.
Good flick.
And next week we're going to a somewhat of a downer flick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a downer. I think that I've got a lot to say about it. I've already started writing my notes. We haven't watched it yet. So next week we are going to look at a movie that was a kind of transformative for me in the way that I look at dramas and a little bit more realism in the sense that there is no real happy fairy tale ending. It's a way that you can really look at drama and look at adult type of concepts and themes. So we are going to talk about Leaving Las Vegas, 1995. Mike Figgis, Academy Award winner Nicolas Cage. Get to see Nicolas Cage before his really crazy years.
And after some of his crazy years.
He was circling him. Yeah, he
was circling the drain. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he was I'm going to get drunk while I'm doing this movie. I'm playing a drunk, but it one of maybe the certainly one of the most deserved Oscars of the 90s, I think, was for him in that. And I have been campaigning to do this movie, so much so that the very next Monday after that, I cover Hollow Man, in which I say I've been trying to talk the guys into watching Leaving Las Vegas because Elizabeth Shue's in Hollow Man also. So anyway, I ended up making that.
But zero nostalgia for the Karate Kid, if you didn't know that for Jeff. None whatsoever. Elizabeth Shue be damned when it comes to the Karate Kid.
Oh, no. Back up. My nostalgia for her is Adventures in Babysitting.
Mm-hmm.
And then this movie, and then Soap Dish, and the Back to the Future sequels. So we're going to be doing that next week. Somebody explain where to go to find our stuffs.
All of it, every bit of it is at filmseizure.com. Except for Jeff's B-movie enema stuff. But Film Seizure, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube's, amongst almost all of your favorite podcast places. Go to Film Seizure, check it out. Send us some emails, send us some feedback, send us requests for movies you'd like to see done. We haven't done any of that really yet.
We've got some on the calendar coming up that are suggested movies. Jason, where can they email us at?
filmseizure@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. We will answer it. And we will. We do. We answer.
We do. We do answer our own fan mail. Yeah, so as Chuck mentioned, I also have B Movie Enema. So if you go to bmovieenema.com, you can find this Friday Disco Godfather starring Rudy Ray Moore. Oh, I love Rudy Ray Moore so much. This Saturday, B Movie Enema, the series, reaches its penultimate episode of the first season with Cycle Vixens. That one's just for me, guys. That one's for me. It's got one of the most bizarre, out of nowhere endings you will ever see in a movie, with everything you see leading up to it. Next Monday, come to Monster Mondays, come to filmseizure.com, listen to my Monster Mondays episode on Lady Frankenstein, an interesting little European kind of sleazy Frankenstein sequel, with a lot of interesting things in it, even though it's probably not that great of a movie. I still find 3 things I like about it, though. So yeah, that is that. Next week, next Wednesday, leaving Las Vegas. So yeah, I guess at this point, does any last words on anything? On anything?
See you next week.
See you next week, suckers.
All right. So until next week, then, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.